Hi, hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess. We're here for the final week of the Penguin Random House versus the Department of Justice, or whichever way it is, trial recap. So I am trying to race against the time because it does look like a thunderstorm is coming in. This one shouldn't be super long because there was just a lot of things reiterated, but they did say some things, and of course they have their closing arguments, so I'm gonna go through that. Obviously this is week 3, so I would go back and watch week 1, then week 2 if you have not already. But again, quickly, the United States has 5 major publishers, and then we have other smaller ones, but the big 5, and currently the biggest one, Penguin Random House, has put in a bid to buy Simon & Schuster, which is a smaller one, and the Department of Justice, so our government, has sued to block that merger. The trial is over. It was 3 weeks long. We are awaiting the results of the trial, and so I have summarized week 1, week 2, and now this is week 3. So without further ado, oh my God, look at Adele. I love her so much. So week 3, we're talking to Madeline McIntosh, who is the CEO of Penguin Random House in the US. And also they're talking to merger and acquisitions executives from Viacom, CBS, and Penguin Random House. There's a lot of names. I don't think the names are super important, but I will mention them. Alex Burkett, who's the Chief Development and Strategy Officer at Viacom, CBS. He and his colleagues want Simon & Schuster to go to a home where things would be good for employees and executives. And the defense asked why this is important to a company whose main revenue and main brands are streaming, obviously Viacom, CBS. And he replied that the end game is always reputational. Sorry, I'm nosy. And he was certain that Penguin Random House or Bertelsmann would provide an excellent home for Simon & Schuster. So I guess going off their reputation, they had more people come in and talk about very generic things like lifespan of a book, like how it goes from, being picked up by an agent to marketing to it being published. They had McIntosh, the CEO, admitted they've made expensive mistakes, like buying titles from celebrity authors, but then references books that didn't have super high advances and blew up, like 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James or Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. And the discussion of advances seems to point to Penguin Random House's willingness to spend whatever is necessary to acquire books they believe in, but then once it's in-house, it gets no special treatment. And she was saying advances are not tied to marketing plans. They keep saying that, and I just think that's very interesting. I don't know. I just think it's very interesting that no matter how big the advance, that does not mean they get special treatment or extra treatment, re-advertisement. And I think that's interesting. So the government, of course, in their cross-examination, their focus was on how big Penguin Random House is already. I think in my last video, Penguin Random House is currently 30-something% of the market. And if they acquired Simon & Schuster, there would be like 49% of the market, I believe. No. So McIntosh said she didn't have statistics on how often Penguin Random House loses bids of 1 million or more to other big 5 houses because books are not a commodity. Also find that interesting. And then we have a senior VP at Penguin Random House who outlined the process the company followed to acquire Simon & Schuster. So of course they had models and all of these things, and it had like a plan through to 2025. And in this plan, bringing in Simon & Schuster would create synergies between $135 to $175 million. One of the cost-cutting measures Penguin Random House would take to move Simon & Schuster's employees from their current location at Rockefeller Center to one of Penguin Random House's headquarters. Because after the transaction, Simon & Schuster would no longer need its own building. So they were saying they outlined their whole plan from the time they put a bid in to throughout 2025 of acquiring Simon & Schuster, what exactly would happen, how much money they would be saving, what they would do with Simon & Schuster employees. So they're saying that they're going to be saving money, and one of those ways obviously is not to have Simon & Schuster employees separate, which I guess makes sense, but they go on to talk about some more things. I think this is interesting. There was like a whole page dedicated to recapping this dude named Manuel Sansegray, I think is his name, Senior VP of Global Acquisitions at Penguin Random House. So he's asked all these questions, but then it said that Judge Pan decided to exclude his testimony. Ruling that his numbers were not independently verified as required by precedent. and she was very critical of all like the things that he put together, which is great because I was going through and it would say something and then in parentheses it'd be like, this isn't true. So hold on, I thought it was funny. Okay, so the Publishers Weekly article, which is where I got all of this information and recap from, will be linked down below, said that in Judge Pan's statement about tossing out his model, the dude whose testimony she decided to exclude, apparently she mistakenly noted that the company anticipated $81 million in savings by 2025. So where are those savings coming from? They would largely come from redundancies, which is people being laid off. Redundancies is you have a bunch of people who are doing the same job and you don't need them all. So that says, it further said $25 million in savings from distribution and warehousing, $25 million from IT and duplicate administrative and managerial functions. The remaining $31 million from the elimination of third-party contracts. So a rep from Penguin Random House said no creative jobs would be lost. So like editing and illustration, I'm trying to think of creative jobs. But when going through another report, Judge Pan asked how many people would this impact in reference to the line about millions in savings. So the guy said, he initially said just a few, but then said it would be 70 to be specific. So I don't know if the 70 is even an accurate number. That number 70 would be overlapping roles at the two companies, like high-end editorial and art production. So never mind, I guess art is on the chopping block. Primarily management positions, not editorial or creative. What? And the number of potential layoffs were fewer than 5. I don't get it. If you said 70 people would be impacted, then how are you only laying off 5 people? That doesn't make any sense. Further, this dude, Manuel, talks about more streamlining, and that would be with distribution and fulfillment, because he said Penguin Random House would only need one of Simon & Schuster's warehouses, which one primarily is in New Jersey. He noted that Penguin Random House has invested heavily in logistics over the next year, so they would be able to handle the influx of books they would need to distribute when they acquire Simon & Schuster and then any other imprints they acquire going forward. And that, so this is where it came in parentheses, it says, Simon & Schuster has a large distribution business. So he was basically trying to say, like, we would be able to handle it. Simon & Schuster wouldn't be, like, they don't have a big distribution business. And they're like, no, they do. Then he also said that they have a sales force that is 5 times the size of Simon & Schuster and they don't need any more. So it's like, are you going to be axing all of those jobs too? He said Penguin Random House has stronger relationships with booksellers, both traditional and independent, especially internationally, as they're sold in 200 countries. And he says Simon & Schuster is only sold in 100 countries. But then in parentheses, it says a rep from Simon & Schuster contacted Publishers Weekly to say that this was factually untrue, as Simon & Schuster books are available in more than 200 countries. So it's like, what's going on here? Why are we lying? So he also said, he talked about enhancing Simon & Schuster's audiobook division, in part by bringing production in-house, because he was saying that they outsource a lot of their production. Like they don't have studios and like production teams in-house. And again, it said, this is factually untrue, as Simon & Schuster does have in-house production studios, editors, and support staff, and that the audiobook business is thriving and successful. So it's like, why are you lying? I don't get it. He also, so Judge Pan also, kept like probing his sources, asking where he's getting these numbers from and why his report did not reflect the last 2 years, because since the pandemic, their sales have actually grown. Like Penguin Random House sales rose 10% in 2021, and they're already up for the first half of 2022. And, Penguin Random House is having good numbers as well. And he also was just like, he basically saying nothing negative is going to happen. Like, it's going to be great for authors, it's going to be great for agents. Like, there's no downside. Penguin Random House, he said, has higher pre-sales, which would give authors a higher chance of being on the bestseller list. So throughout his testimony, he ascribed a great deal of power to agents who he contended routinely entice a bidding war between 2 imprints from the same publisher. This can be achieved by keeping a third bidder in the process, which legally allows them to forego informing the parent corporation that they have 2 imprints competing for the same title. That seems so messy to me, the imprints competing for a similar title. I don't know if that really happens that often with other companies, but it just doesn't I don't know. He and other people have made it seem so simple, like, oh, it's gonna be fine. Like, we're not gonna lose competition because the imprints that we take over for Simon & Schuster can stay independent and they can bid against Penguin Random House imprints. And it's like, is that gonna work? Is it gonna work? I don't know. Do y'all see like the cloud coming in? I don't know if it's getting darker. Oh my God. He also said, even if there were fewer deep-pocketed bidders for books, advances would not go down. And so the judge immediately challenged that. She said, lowering advances is not a conscious decision. You just offer lower advances and still win because there is less competition to drive up the price. And he said he didn't follow the logic of the judge. And I just typed clown emoji. And he also, referencing bidding, he said publishers bid a lot and they lose a lot. And as proof, he referenced Joanne Rowling because so many publishers passed her up and obviously she turned into an international bestseller. So it's like, okay, I don't know. But then of course the next day, the judge excluded his testimony because of all his faulty shit and his numbers weren't independently verified. So then we have the defense calling in Edward Snyder, who's a professor of economics and management at Yale. So he was talking again about the government's focus on books that are given advances of over $250,000, pointing out at one point that those most likely to be impacted by consolidation were authors whose contracts were around $50,000, which I think is super true, that they're really not paying attention to the authors who are going to be affected the most. But as I've said in the past 2 videos, only a small percentage of publishing, I think like 4%, funds the majority of publishing. So like I get why they would focus on those big numbers because it's important to have those big titles, but also I think they should have also realized or like talked more about how it would affect mid-list authors. Judge asked hypothetical questions like, if 90% of the industry was dominated by one company, leaving the other 10 as a sole constraint of the dominant form, would that be competitive? Or if you have a book go out from auction and there's only 2, like, do you consider that competitive, or would it be better to have 3? So it's just like saying, because we're gonna go down from 5 big publishers to 4. Previously, the defense has tried to say that all of the other publishers outside of the big 5, so any independent or like Scholastic, Amazon, whatever, all of them basically, if you added them together, would equal a Simon & Schuster size, and so they should be considered a big 6, but like they're not one, they're very separate. So it's just going to, I think, and it seems like the government believes, and the judge from the question she's asking is like, well, we're going to lose a big publisher, so that's inherently going to lower competition. And the defense is like, no, girl. Okay, on to the final day. I love how they said the final day did not offer fireworks. So they just, they had, this is titled Ending Where We Started.
So this was one of the days and I wasn't able to get into it. I tried to subscribe and for some reason it didn't work. So sorry, can't give you this.
Okay, so I'm currently up. It's like 11:33 p.m. I've joined Ashley's Patron Sprint editing this video, but I had recorded myself trying to summarize these statements and it just wasn't good. So I'm actually just going to read through them. They're going to be on the screen just so you can get all of the things that they said, since it is the end of the trial. And then, I'll pop back on to wrap up the video. So Reed is for the DOJ. Went on to discuss the fact that though the anticipated top-selling authors were only 2% of the market, they remain significant. During the trial, the figure was floated that they may represent as much as 70% of sales. He dismissed Penguin Random House's arguments that they were viable competitors who might suddenly emerge, such as Amazon Publishing or new companies like Spiegel and Grau, of which Reed said, a publisher that refounded itself a few years ago and published a handful of books, that Penguin Random House closed the imprint and retained its backlist. It's improbable to find publishers they didn't want to keep are now competitive with them. He went on noting that no publisher has entered the market in the past 30 years and become as strong as the Big Five. Reed went on to defend DOJ's decision to focus on authors who earn book advances over $250,000, a point that has been continuously criticized by the defense as arbitrary. Those authors at the very high end have different needs and opportunities than those at the very low end, he said, noting that higher advances were typically tied to an anticipation of higher sales, a point made by Simon & Schuster CEO Jonathan Karp and Penguin Random House US CEO Madeline McIntosh at various points during the trial. Furthermore, he defended the use of a single figure, in this case $250,000, by pointing to prior antitrust cases involving Staples and Whole Foods, where a single sum was agreed upon as a placeholder to differentiate the most valuable aspects of the business. I just want to acknowledge that these might be out of order. I'm so sorry. Underscoring that this was not a trial about publishing per se, he launched his first Fusillade? What? Fusillade? We have been told that this is an industry where the normal rules of economics and antitrust do not apply. Before, in pointed terms, criticizing Penguin Random House's various arguments, it's almost like they're claiming that the value of books isn't about expected sales but alchemy. He also dismissed as immaterial Penguin Random House's assertion that it would be a good custodian for Simon & Schuster. The good intentions of the defendants don't save this merger, and they don't save this industry from a duopoly. Reed also rejected the idea that sophisticated agents hold enough power to be a viable form of constraint for Penguin Random House's relative potential market power, contending that they are slipping in influence, citing the fact that advance payments are now being paid in quarters rather than thirds, and certain rights are no longer negotiable. One particular area Reed focused on was Penguin Random House's pledge not to curtail imprints in a merged company from bidding against each other. It's not enforceable, but it is revocable. They can close, merge, refocus imprints. They can admonish editors not to take risks. They can deny them money for advances. All this can be done internally without violating the law. He reiterated that there appeared to be no dispute that post-merger Penguin Random House will be more dominant than it already is, and remarked that even the board of directors of Bertelsmann recognized publishing in the U.S. market is an oligopoly. Quoting the DOJ's expert witness, economist Nathan Hill, Reed said a combined Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster will have 49% market share of anticipated top sellers, while the Big Five will have more than 95% of the market. Hill also anticipated reduced advances by $45,000 per book, and Random House and Simon & Schuster's advances reduced by $105,000 per book. Reed suggested the merger and lower advances would curtail the diversity of books published, speculating that some books would not be researched as accurately or never get written. He said a merged Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster would have unprecedented influence over the trade market, providing the potential for retribution to a publisher that competes with Penguin Random House. It would be easily implemented and enforced, Reed claimed. When Penguin Random House has half the market, they can easily poach or counter-poach authors or delay printing of their books. Agents and authors, too, would be vulnerable. We could see standardization of the royalty at 15% and non-negotiability of audio rights, Reed said. This is all something that could be done. In closing, Reed underscored that for the government to win, it need only prove a reasonable probability of harm. And, said Reed, the harm is substantial. He continued, Stephen King, he flew here voluntarily because he understood the impact on younger authors. He understood the consolidation would make it tougher for them. In conclusion, he said, let's end where we started. Whether it's an advance of $75,000 or $140,000 or $800,000, this is compensation for real work. This means something to people who work hard to generate books. So Penguin Random House's closing argument, their attorney Daniel Petrocelli took the stand offering his opposing view of the facts. Petrocelli got in on the most memorable quip of the day when he referenced the DOJ calling Stephen King to the stand. He said, I enjoyed listening to Stephen King, but no one is disputing his earnings. There are writers in this market who are billionaires. I mean, Stephen King could buy Simon & Schuster. Petrocelli also observed that books that earn $250,000 to $1 million advances are actually more risky acquisitions than has been presumed throughout the trial. We might call them unanticipated top sellers. Petrocelli went on to attack what he saw as the government's use of the movie industry and others as having a false equivalency with the book business. He reiterated Penguin Random House's position that $250,000 is a false market and the belief that $50,000 is a much more appropriate level as there are many more buyers there, and added it was also the level below which enhanced services, i.e. marketing from publishers, fall off. Queried further by Judge Pan on this point, Petrocelli said the government didn't want to use a $50,000 figure as a cutoff because it would have undermined the $250,000 level. And later, the only reason we are here is because the government has created artificial concentration to create artificial harm. The defense has noted that the government provided no evidence the merger would lead to consumer harm, the typical standard in an antitrust case. He explained further why the government's premise that the worth of a book and by extension the author is not fully quantified by a profit and loss statement. Actual marketing spend is not based on what is in the P&L. As Madeline McIntosh said, what a publisher spends on a book is based on feedback from retailers, salespeople, and others. Marketing only has a loose correlation to the advance. When it comes to the impotence of other publishers to compete and agents to exert influence, Petrocelli dismissed the DOJ's position by stating that power in publishing was determined on a case-by-case basis and because of the volume of titles available, quite diffuse use. 60% of manuscript sales are bilateral negotiations. 20% are best bid auctions. The remainder are round robin auctions. He later returned to the testimony of both Edward Snyder, Penguin Random House's expert economist, and Nathan Hill, the expert for DOJ. When it comes to winning bids on anticipated top-selling titles, Snyder said Penguin Random House or Simon & Schuster won 6% of the time, and Hill said they won 12% of the time. So 90% of the time, neither of these two companies are the number one or two. When it comes to the competitive nature of publishing, Petrocelli asserted that market shares are not good indicators, as there was a great deal of competition within publishing companies among imprints. In a rare moment of acquiescence to Penguin Random House's argument, Judge Pan asked Petrocelli, does imprint competition undermine the government's arguments about market share? Petrocelli replied, it doesn't give any credit to internal competition. Agents are provoking competition among dozens and dozens of publishers. Market share doesn't reflect that reality. With Simon & Schuster's closing argument, in his close, Stephen Fishbane, the attorney Simon & Schuster, and his parent Viacom CBS hired, said that his company agreed to sell to Bertelsmann because Bertelsmann offered the best price. We also believe that the deal will benefit Simon & Schuster authors. He addressed the concern that it would create too much market concentration. Market share is not static, said Fishbane, asserting that you will have competitors emerge for any gap in the market that emerges. He cited Scholastic and Disney as large publishers that are not considered Big Five. If we included them, it would change the landscape. After resolving a disagreement with Judge Pan about the nature and relevance of Christian and romance books to calculation of market share, a reference to the claim that if you exclude HarperCollins's religion and Harlequin business, Penguin Random House is 3 times larger than HarperCollins' trade operation. Fishbane focused on advances, arguing the DOJ says they will fall by $100,000, but that doesn't make sense. Books are not commodities. He then went on to rebuke the much derided term farm team, which had been bandied about after it was entered into evidence out of context from a memo by late Simon & Schuster CEO Caroline Reedy. Other publishers are not farm teams. Many best-selling authors stay at small and medium-sized publishers. They are real competitors. They are a real force. He continued later, my clients want this merger because it is a cultural fit. Penguin Random House is fully committed to books. Other publishers felt disadvantaged because the new entity would do a better job at buying, marketing, and selling books. Even their criticism shows this is better for authors.
That was the last article that they had wrapping it up. And so it says that Judge Pan is expected to make a decision within the next coming months. I don't know how long that's going to take. So if you watched all 3 of these videos, 1, thank you so much. I appreciate you for sticking it out with me. And 2, what do you think the ruling will be? I honestly don't know. Like, some points I'm like really hopeful that the judge is just seeing how ridiculous and the bullshit that they're making up. And then on the other side, I'm like, I don't know if the government had a super strong case. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm no legal professional. Nothing of any capacity. So I'm just like, I don't know. So if you want to add any legal advice or you interpret anything I said better than what I tried to explain it, let me know down below. Always welcome a conversation in the chat, or in the comments. Just keep it cute, keep it respectful. But that wraps it up. The case is over. It's over, and now we await the decision, which I will let you know, of course. And if there's any additional information like after the decision is made, I'll let you know that as well. Now it's raining. I'm gonna make some pasta and sit down. I'm gonna make some pasta and sit down. And so, Nigel, stop it. Get out of his butt.
Oh, also, you remember there was a lawsuit they filed in Virginia against Akamath and Genderqueer? Well, it has been dismissed because they're saying it's unconstitutional. So, suck it, people. I am trying to rack my brain on a good Clarence Thomas skit I could come up with. But good news, that case has been dismissed. So at least we have one positive thing.
Thank you for watching. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to. The Publishers Weekly article will be linked down below. I always have my information on where to find me on the internet in the description, ways to support my channel. If you want to join my Patreon, if y'all don't stop, why y'all gonna do this right here? Oh my God. Stay blessed, hydrated, moisturized, and sunscreen. Yes, I have my sunscreen on, even if it's raining. And I will catch you on my next one. Bye.